One of the things I tell boards right off the bat, you cannot expect to find one person who will make your organization succeed the way you want it to. It's got to be a collective effort. It's got to be a collaborative effort. And so executive directors, they have a lot of pressure put on them, and they have to have a myriad of skills. They have to be fundraisers, they have to be administrators, they have to be people. They have to know how to manage and work with budgets and do all these kinds of things. And we're looking for unicorns. And really what I've been kind of thinking is I really feel like in order for a nonprofit to really be managed and run well, you need to segregate some of those duties. But again, it goes back to what is your mission and what do you need to fulfill your mission?
You're listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast with host May Harris.
Today on the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast, I get the opportunity to interview Trull, who is the founder and principal of CT Nonprofit Consulting, an organization that assists nonprofit organizations and founders. Welcome to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast, Trull.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's good to see you, May.
It's good to see you too. It's really funny. We were talking before we started the recording for this podcast about, I wanted to share with Crystal, we've passed each other, I'm sure, at conferences, passed each other at the University of San Diego, but I don't think we've ever really had the opportunity to sit down and have a real discussion. So I'm really excited about this.
I know. And we shared students. I know we've had the same students too.
We have. And, I was looking in preparation for this podcast a little bit about your background, and it is like somewhat of a mirror or carbon copy of my own. So, you started as a nonprofit executive director. I think you started at National High, started at Kinder, and then went to development. You went to Ronald McDonald House. I went to the Water Conservation Garden. And then somewhere along the lines, we both made the decision as an executive director to go back to school. Right? And we both chose the University of San Diego. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about that process for you, because I think maybe a lot of our listeners, they're like, oh, I'm a nonprofit executive director. Why would I have to go back to school? What is there for me? So maybe you can share a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. Although I haven't got my law degree yet, that's probably next. So yeah,
check.
I may do that. So my education journey. Well, I think I've always loved learning. So as an executive and being in the nonprofit world, I didn't go to school to be a nonprofit professional, where there's a lot of programs that are out there these days where you can actually get a degree in nonprofit management, which is what we taught in. And I always knew that there was value in learning common practices, learning from people who have been in the sector for a while. And that's when I found the master's program in nonprofit management leadership at USD, University of San Diego. And I originally started off just taking one course, as a certificate program. But then after the first course, I thought, oh, I'm hooked. I got to do this as my master's. So doing that program put me into another level, I think, of understanding how to lead and manage a nonprofit organization, because it gave me experience in all the different facets of what it means to run a nonprofit. So I used it in working with boards and developing programs, doing evaluations, assessment, understanding what that means. And then I moved into consulting. And then as a consultant, I found that for doing assessment work, evaluations, and even just working with boards too, that doctorate was kind of the next step, getting that PhD in order to have those rigorous research methods that would validate a lot of the things that I was experiencing in the sector, or invalidate and give me a different way to look at it. So that's why I went on to get the PhD, the doctorate in philanthropy, nonprofits and philanthropy. It's a doctorate in leadership studies, but a focus on nonprofits and philanthropy. So that's kind of how my journey progressed.
Right. So I did not go all the way to get a PhD. As you said, I already had a JD, Juris Doctorate. That's the top for me. Yep. But you went ahead and you got the PhD, which you had to do a lot of research in the sector and a lot of development of the sector. So tell me a little bit about what that was like, getting a PhD in leadership and philanthropy.
Well, it was a lot of work. There's a reason why they call JDs and PhDs terminal degrees, because, they try to kill you as you're doing them because they're just a lot of work.
Absolutely.
So, looking back, I want to say that not everybody needs to get a PhD to be, a professional in our sector.
Not at all.
Not for everybody.
Right.
And for me, I wanted to be able to understand some of the things, the research, be able to understand frameworks, give me more tools, because I was working with, and I still do work with so many different nonprofit organizations, and they all have so many different needs. They're all unique. So for me, going and getting that deeper understanding of the tools, the ability to, to understand what their needs were, to apply different theories and frameworks, I think was one of my, exciting things about it too, because it just expanded my toolkit. And then it also gave me a peek into some of the research. Oftentimes nonprofit professionals, they will tell you, well, we're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And they don't always know why. And some of it comes out of this research that comes out of academia about what works, in theory, what works in a nonprofit organization. So for me, it just allowed me to build that bridge. I call myself a pracademic, between the practitioner and the academic, being able to build that bridge of what that research actually means and translate it in a way that makes it understandable to, a small nonprofit, medium-sized nonprofit, and use those tools in a way that makes sense without having to, recreate the wheel too.
Absolutely. And some of those resources that are coming out of academia, and the University of San Diego is just one of many, can be applied by nonprofits of all sizes, I think, and it can be anything from program related. So the things that are working, what you need to do from a research or from a programmatic standpoint, but it can also be like, what are funders looking for more and more? What is going to resonate with stakeholders, community members, everything? Those are the kinds of things that, students in academia, whether they're in the master's program, collaborating with others in their cohort, or PhD students, doing research, a lot of really great stuff is really coming out of these programs.
It's for sure. And I don't know if you've ever highlighted the work of ARNOVA, which is the International Association for Research on Nonprofit and the Voluntary Sector, voluntary organizations. So much research comes out of that organization from all around the world that I learned about in my doc program, that I also share with my master's students. A wonderful resource.
Right. And so it probably isn't in most nonprofit executive directors' practice to go and dig through the research.
No.
But that's where consultants like you and many other people that I have spoken with on the Nonprofit Counsel podcast really come in to distill all of that good stuff, all those amazing nuggets. When you're working with your clients, how does that look? How do they come to you? What are they typically looking for? And also, have you seen a change, in the last 2, 4, 6, 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, no surprise. A lot of nonprofits I talk to, first thing they tell me is we need money and we need board members. That's like the top two things. And I keep saying, okay, money's a good thing. Everybody needs money. But I think other of your guests have always, have mentioned, let's say you had the money. What do you know what you're going to do with it? And that's where some of the research comes in, to help organizations to figure out what would we do with this money. Things like a logic model, a theory of change, strategic planning, strategy screens, those kinds of things. So I don't know that the needs have changed much, but I think what's changed is that nonprofit organizations understand that they don't know what they don't know more, and they're willing to say, you know what we don't know what we don't know. We need somebody like you as a consultant who brings that expertise to help us work through this together. So I think what's changed maybe is there's more of a willingness, especially after COVID. A lot of organizations, they realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of things we didn't think about. So it was a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of organizations to really think about what we're doing and making sure that we're doing it well. So the shift has been a little bit, in my experience, there's more of an acceptance and awareness of we don't know what we don't know.
Right. Well, and what I've seen post-COVID especially is an increased, attention or interest, I guess, in cooperating, collaborating, doing things, aligned, rather than, I think, when I was an executive director and when I was in development, it was competition. We're all in
Yeah.
competition. Why would I work with that organization? It's doing the same thing I'm doing. So if I work with that person, they're going to get the money. I'm not. And I think that that's been a real kind of cosmic shift in the sector. It's like, there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of philanthropic dollars. Look at Fidelity Charitable, for goodness sake. I mean, there's a lot of money. But what is going to really make your organization appealing is not that kind of closed mindset, not that competition. You're not a capitalist entity. I mean, you can have a little bit of entrepreneurial capitalist tendencies, but it's not the dog eat dog. I'm going to bury you kind of mentality that's going to win, especially with funders. They want to see that you're open, that you're willing, that you're giving. And then also, so what? We give you the money.
Yeah.
So what? What's going to happen now? And I think that was always really difficult it has been difficult for the clients that I work with to distill so what out of their brain. And so I know that you work with clients to help them get that out. So what are some of those key tips that you would give to organizations that they're so passionate about what they do and they're doing such good work and they have plans to do such good work, but how do they kind of translate that into a so what to funders?
Yeah, that's always a tricky conversation too to have with organizations, especially if you're working with a board of directors that has been there a long time. There hasn't been a lot of turnover. They get really attached to things, and they sometimes have a hard time explaining so what. And I always go back to the mission. The mission is foundational for me. What is your mission for you as an organization? I always start there. And if a board or even if the staff, they can't connect what they're doing back to their mission, that tells me that we have a lot of work to do with the so what piece. And so I think that the so what is for me is understanding, first of all, what the mission is. And if you understand what your mission is and what your purpose, what you're set up to do, you will then be able to articulate the so what. And I like to say, if you didn't exist, what would happen? And that's a way to kind of draw out the so what. Why is what we're doing important?
Yeah, that's a great tip. Imagine your community without the services that you provide rather than, oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah. So, and it's really, again, each organization is so different. It's almost like in my work, I have to almost be like a psychologist too, to kind of figure out how can I speak in a way that they understand, what kind of language is important. The so what, we talk about storytelling. The so what for some organizations is about telling their story. Other organizations, it's about showing direct impact. Other organizations, it's about a longer term goal. So the so what varies for a lot of different organizations. So I'm always asking questions. Okay, so what about this? Or what about this? Or I'm reflecting. So what I hear you saying is this, so that they can really kind of drill down. Is this what we mean? And is this what we want? Because if it is, then that will matter.
Right. So I want to circle back to one thing that you mentioned earlier, and that is working with established boards, which brings its own set of challenges. And you mentioned one, but you also mentioned, and I couldn't agree more, that the second thing that organizations typically say they need and they want are board members. It's those resources, the think tank that the nonprofit needs. So are there any tips or tricks that you advise your clients or your students? Because we both teach in the nonprofit management program at USD, that you kind of give to them when they're looking to basically bring on new board members.
I'm actually teaching a board development class right now. I'm currently in the midst of that. I love helping people think about the board differently. It just goes back to each organization so different. So what do I do? It's so different for each one. I try to help them understand, first of all, their mission. Always goes back to mission. And who is that mission trying to serve? Okay. And so if we understand what the mission is and who it's trying to serve and what it's trying to do, that sheds some light on the kinds of people we need at that leadership board level. Okay, so once we get a sense, everybody goes to the basic matrix. Oh, if they have a legal background,
right.
If they're connected to, but it's so much more than that.
It's so much more than that.
Yeah, we all talk about diversity and representation. Well, we want to make sure that we're representing our community. They have people who bring those either life skills, lived experiences, certain types of ethnicity, certain types of skin color. Those are very important too. And even were they a client? Maybe were they a parent of a client? There's all different ways to really establish what that looks like. But you have to understand, again, your mission and who you're trying to serve to understand what that universe looks like of the people that you need to represent. So it's almost like backtracking. So I will always tell boards, this is common knowledge. You usually try to bring on people that look like you because that's who you're most comfortable with. And if your board looks a certain way, you're just going to continue to perpetuate that. So you have to kind of, again, this is where some of the psychology comes in. You have to kind of break out of some of those mindsets. And I try to just encourage them to think about who are the groups that you've heard about in your community, but you've never really interacted with. That's where you start. You start with those folks that you have heard about, but you've never actually met. And to just really get a little bit, just kind of push them a little bit outside their comfort zone. And I find that once they do that, they realize, oh, we can do this. I really enjoyed meeting those people. Why didn't I talk to them sooner? And a whole new world opens up for them. But it's about being intentional and being able to articulate the so what and why we need you and why you need us. Because oftentimes I think boards go out into the community. We need you. But what's in it for them? And let's talk about what are they going to get out of it? Because it really is about relationship. Everybody says it all the time, but you have to actually have a reason why they want to join you and what they're going to get out of it, which means you have to understand who they are.
You absolutely do. I couldn't agree more. The other thing that I think is a critical piece is evaluating the organization where it is right now, because there are working boards and there are governing boards and there are other types of boards, generative boards. Like there are so many different types. And so when you say being intentional, it's in being intentional in the individual that you're asking to be on the board, but also in that whole back and forth quid pro quo, a little for something. What are you asking them to provide? Are they the ones who are going to be packing the boxes, when you are doing a food drive? Is that what you need from your board right now because you haven't built up enough to have a large volunteer base? Or is it you need to show up once a quarter for a really big governing, kind of meeting? And those are so different. And again, interplay with what's in it for them. I might be much more interested in being the working board packing boxes because that's what I really want to do at this stage in my life. Or I could be, I'm raising kids. I can't get there, but I can govern really, really well. So, being intentional, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And also I would add that, it goes back to recruitment, understanding what you need and why, and starting from there in a way that both people are on the same page, you as the organization and the prospective board member. Everybody's on the same page about what's expected. Because the other thing that I hear all the time in the sector is our board is not engaged. And I have to say, well, did you set out expectations for them when they first came on, or were they more of a warm body kind of thing? Just we need to fill a spot, which goes back to being intentional. And it's an ongoing. It's not just something you do once a year. Let's pull out our board matrix and say, okay, who do we need? Who do we have? Let's, check out. It's an ongoing process to always be identifying who it is that you want to interact with, who are people that you're not interacting with. How do you know? So it's a continual reflective process. And I tell boards, you have to put this on your agenda, because if you don't put it on your agenda, it's not going to happen. And you can't rely on a committee to do all that work. It's got to be at that leadership level, because everything trickles down. What happens at that leadership level impacts all the way down to the clients, the cultures, the values, the ideas. It all trickles down. So it has to be an ongoing process that's building relationship and understanding why and how.
Right. Well, and I also think, just piggybacking off of that, the critical nature of a dynamic, well-functioning board in their relationship with a dynamic, well-functioning executive. And I've seen that relationship break down a lot. And it's funny, I think, at least in my experience, the impulse of boards is, oh, there's something wrong with that executive. And they do very little self-reflection. But when you take the time to be as intentional as you're describing, and I totally agree with, you can be a little bit more proactive in that, keeping that good relationship with your executive director, your CEO. So I've seen boards that are too disconnected. I've seen boards that are too micromanaging. I've seen boards that are, completely hands off, but will blame everything on the executive. So are there any kind of, I don't know, secrets or tips that you would want to share that basically about building a really good relationship between a high functioning board and a dynamic executive director?
Yeah. I'm still trying to find the secret to that so I can make my millions. But in my experience, it kind of goes back again to that recruitment. I do executive searches. And one of the things, I tell boards right off the bat, you cannot expect to find one person who will make your organization, succeed the way you want it to. It's got to be a collective effort. It's got to be a collaborative effort. And so executive directors, they have a lot of pressure put on them, and they have to have a myriad of skills. They have to be fundraisers, they have to be administrators, they have to be people. They have to know how to manage and work with budgets and do all these kinds of things. And we're looking for unicorns. And really, what I've been kind of thinking is, I really feel like in order for a nonprofit to be managed and run well, you need to segregate some of those duties. But again, it goes back to what is your mission and what do you need to fulfill your mission? So, if you're an organization that it relies heavily on donations and contributions, then you're going to want somebody who can be out in the community if you don't have a development department. You're going to want that face of the organization who's more of the people person, more, to bring in those gifts and dollars. And then maybe you want somebody who's maybe a deputy director who's handling the internal staff. Or maybe if you're an organization that's more bureaucratic and you have government contracts, then your executive director is going to have to be well versed in how to manage and gain contracts and understand legal and policy issues that are related to some of those bureaucratic relationships. And then you have somebody on the inside who's maybe doing more of the outward facing. So it's trying to find the people who bring the best skill set to meet the need, but it's up to the board to understand what that need is. And so that's where the relationship breaks down. The board wants this savior to come in and help them with all their problems and have all of these experience, and not paying them a lot too for some of these smaller organizations. And they're sloughing off their responsibility. And that's where it breaks down immediately. And so on the flip side, as an executive director, when I'm potentially, matching organizations up, it's about being transparent. The organization has to be transparent to that new ED or ED and say, these are our real issues. These are the things that we need help with, and not just, create this pie in the sky, rosy, rose-colored glasses. You're going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. They really have to be realistic, to show those, areas that aren't
warts
that great.
And all. Warts and all.
Exactly. But that comes back to a board being aware. They have to be asking themselves and doing that work to be aware and to change their mindset about where they are and what they don't know.
Absolutely. Well,
so it comes back to the beginning, the establishing of the relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the relationships are key among the board, the relationship, the board, the executive director. And I think a lot of times when I've seen the best, and this isn't like the $1 million magic sauce that you referenced, but when you have a really good board chair that has a really good relationship with the executive director, because it's tough, especially if you have a larger board to kind of manage that relationship. It's like, especially we've both been in the executive director seat, and it's like, who do I report to again? Like there's this committee and this committee and this committee. But when you have a really strong board chair or president and you've got a really awesome dynamic executive director, I think that's really where I've seen the magic happen. Yeah.
And with that, I will say, I find that vice chairs and vice presidents are the most underutilized board position. Again, the same thing with the executive director. We're expecting them to do all these things, and we're expecting the president to have just as many skills and talents, but yet leveraging that EVP role for more, maybe some of the logistic pieces, more of the maybe leading strategic planning or chairing some of the other committees, really allows that chair to flourish and to be that support to that executive director. So I think on both ends, both in the internal leadership and the board leadership, there are opportunities to start really putting people where they thrive in their skill sets.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. I was going to ask you if there's anything that you wanted to share with our listeners as we close out, but that was phenomenal, right? Right there. Utilize additional people in those vice chair. But if you wanted to add anything, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh boy. Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I don't know how much time we have, but I think for you, for anybody, whether you want to be a board member or you're working with your board, or as a board member, working with an executive director, I think for me, it's you gotta take yourself out of the equation. You gotta take your personal agendas out for the purpose of the organization. That's where most of the breakdowns happen, when people put their personal agendas or they hold on to things too tightly and they forget, why am I here in the first place? It's for that mission. It all goes back to the mission. Focus on the mission and things will work out.
Oh, wonderfully wise words. Well, thank you so much, Crystal, for joining us on the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast. Are you ready to lead with clarity and confidence? Head to nonprofitcounsel.com to find the tools you need to start smart, lead strong, and create lasting impact.